Hi, boys and girls. This is Mrs. P, and I am reading chapter 16 from A Long Walk to Water. And remember, it's based on a true story. And I keep telling you that for the simple reason that when it's a true story and it's happened before now, it's history. And we need to learn from our history. We need to learn from past things that were done and find a better way to continue our lives. And so, since you guys are young, this is something you might want to think about because the world is going to be left to you. What kind of good changes are you going to make? Okay, so let's see. Long Walk to Water. And remember, we go kind of back and forth between a couple of kids. And it's 2009, and then I think the other one is 19 something or other. Oh, we'll find out. Chapter 16, Southern Sudan, 2009. After the excitement of seeing that first spray of water, the villagers went back to work. Remember, they were digging, and they were digging for a long time with drillers. And then they finally found water, but it was just kind of muddy water, so they're still hopeful because if they get through that, then they should be able to reach clear water. And as you know, because you are smart and very intelligent students, you have to have water. You have to have water to drink. You have to have water to grow things. And so here in Africa, they aren't able to feed themselves all the time because it's hard to get water. So after the excitement of seeing that first spray of water, the villagers went back to work. Several men gathered in front of Naya's house. They had tools with them, hoes and spades and scythes. Her father went out to meet them. The men walked together to a spot beyond the second big tree and began clearing the land. Naya watched them for a few moments. Her father saw her and waved. She put the plastic can down and ran over to him. "Papa, what are you doing?" "Cleaning the land here, getting ready to build." "To build what?" And Naya's father smiled. "Can't you guess?" So now we're on to the other side. Rochester, New York, 1996 to 2003. Salva had been in Rochester for nearly a month and still had not seen a single dirt road. Unlike southern Sudan, it seemed that here in America, every road was paved. At times, the cars whizzed by so fast he was amazed that anyone on foot could cross safely. His new father, Chris, told him that dirt roads did exist out in the countryside, but there were none in Salva's new neighborhood. I'm trying to hold this still, but I'm not doing a very good job, I don't think. All the buildings had electricity. There were white people everywhere. Snow fell from the sky for hours at a time and then stayed on the ground for days. And sometimes it would start to melt during the day, but before it all disappeared, more snow would fall. Salva's new mother, Louise, told him it would probably be April, 3 more months, before the snow went away completely. The first several weeks of Salva's new life were so bewildering that he was grateful for his studies. His lessons, especially English, gave him something to concentrate on, a way to block out the confusion for an hour or two at a time. His new family helped, too. All of them were kind to him, patiently explaining the millions of things he had to learn. It had taken 4 days for Salva to travel from the Ifo refugee camp to his new home in New York. There were times when he could hardly believe he was still on the same planet. Now that Salva was learning more than a few simple words, he found the English language quite confusing, like the letters O-U-G-H, rough, though, fought, through, bow. The same letters were pronounced so many different ways. Or how a word had to be changed depending on the sentence. You said chickens when you meant the living birds that walked and squawked and laid eggs, but it was chicken with no S when it was on your plate ready to be eaten. We're having chicken for dinner. That was correct, even if you cooked 100 chickens. Sometimes he wondered if he would ever be able to speak and read English well, but slowly, with hours of hard work over the months and years, his English improved. Remembering Michael, Salva also joined a volleyball team. It was fun playing volleyball just as it had been at the camp. Setting and spiking the ball were the same in any language. Salva had been in Rochester for more than 6 years now. He was going to college, and he had decided to study business. He had a vague idea that he would like to return to Sudan someday to help the people who lived there. Wait a minute. Okay, I skipped a page. Sometimes that seemed like an impossible notion. In his homeland, there was so much war and destruction, poverty, disease, and starvation, and so many problems that had not been solved by governments or rich people or big aid organizations. What could he possibly do to help? Salva thought about this question a lot, but no answers came to him. Where am I? Oh, okay. One evening at the end of a long day of study, Salva sat down at the family computer and opened his email. He was surprised to see a message from a cousin of his, someone he barely knew. The cousin was working for a relief agency in Zimbabwe. Salva clicked open the message. His eyes read the words, but at first his brain could not comprehend them. United Nations Clinic, your father, stomach surgery. Salva read the words again and again. Then he jumped to his feet and ran through the house to find Chris and Louise. "My father!" he shouted. "My father! They have found my father!" And after several exchanges of emails, Salva learned that the cousin had not actually seen or spoken to his father. The clinic where his father was recovering was in a remote part of southern Sudan. There was no telephone or email service, no way of communicating with the clinic staff. The staff kept lists of all the patients they treated. These lists were submitted to the United Nations aid agencies. Salva's cousin worked for one of the agencies, and he had seen the name of Salva's father on the list. Salva immediately began planning to travel to Sudan, but with the war still raging, it was very difficult to make the arrangements. He had to get permits, fill out dozens of forms, and organize plane flights and car transport in a region where there were no airports or roads. Salva, and Chris and Louise as well, spent hours on the phone to various agencies and offices. It took not days or weeks, but months before all the plans were in place. And there was no way to get a message to the hospital. At times, Salva felt almost frantic at the delays and the frustrations. What if my father leaves the hospital without telling anyone where he's going? Or what if I get there too late? I will never be able to find him again. And at last, all the forms were filled out and all the paperwork was in order. Salva flew in a jet to New York City, another one to Amsterdam, and a third to Kampala in Uganda. In Kampala, it took him 2 days to get through customs and immigration before he could board a smaller plane to go to Juba in southern Sudan. And then he rode in a jeep on a dusty dirt roads into the bush. How familiar everything was, and yet how different. The unpaved roads, the scrubby brushes and trees, the huts roofed with sticks mounted together, everything was just as Salva remembered it, as if he had left only yesterday. At the same time, the memories of his life in Sudan were very distant. How could memories feel so close and so far away at the same time? After many hours of jolting and bumping along the roads in the jeep, after nearly a week of exhausting travel, Salva entered the shanty that served as a recovery room at the makeshift hospital. A white woman stood to greet him. "Hello," he said. "I am looking for a patient named Mawin Dut Arik." Okay, we're going to go ahead and go to chapter 17 because we can. Chapter 17, Southern Sudan, 2009. And I want to read because I want to hurry up and get back and find out if that was really his dad. What do you think we are building here? Naya's father asked, smiling. A house? Naya guessed, or a barn? Her father shook his head. Something better, he said. A school. Naya's eyes widened. The nearest school was a half a day's walk from their home, and Naya knew this because Depp had wanted to go there, but it was too far. A school? She echoed. Yes, he replied. With the well here, no one will have to go to the pond anymore, so all the children will be able to go to school. Naya stared at her father. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. When at last she was able to speak, it was only in a whisper. All the children, Papa? All the children? The girls too? Her father's smile grew broader. Yes, Naya, girls too, he said. Now go and fetch water for us, and he returned to his work, scything the long grass. Naya went back and picked up the plastic can. She felt as if she were flying. School. She would learn to read and write. Okay, Sudan and Rochester, New York, 2003 to 2007. Oh, Salva stood at the foot of one of the beds in the crowded clinic. Hello, he said. Hello, the patient replied politely. I've come to visit you, Salva said. To visit me? The man frowned. Who are you? You are Maween Dut Arik, aren't you? Yes, that is my name. Salva smiled, his insides trembling. Even though his father looked older now, Salva had recognized him right away. But it was as if his eyes needed help from his ears. He needed to hear his father's words to believe he was real. I am your son. I am Salva. The man looked at Salva and shook his head. No, he said, it's not possible. Yes, Salva said. It's me, Father. He moved to the side of the bed. Maween Dut reached out and touched the arm of this tall stranger beside him. Salva, he whispered. Can it really be you? Salva waited. Maween Dut stared for a long time, and then he cried out, Salva, my son, my son! His body shaking with sobs of joy, he reached up to hug Salva tightly. It had been almost 19 years since they had last seen each other. Maween Dut sprinkled water on his son's head, the Dinka way of blessing someone who was lost and is found again. Everyone was sure you were dead, Maween Dut said. The village wanted to kill a cow for you. That was how Salva's people mourned the death of a loved one. I would not let them. I never gave up hope that you were still alive somewhere. And my mother? Salva asked, barely daring to hope. His father smiled. She's back in the village. Salva wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. I must see her. But his father shook his head. There is still war near Loon Arik, my son. If you went there, both sides would try to force you to fight with them. You must not go. There was so much more to talk about. His father told Salva that his sisters were with his mother, but of his 3 brothers, only Ring had survived the war. Arik, the oldest, and Kual, the youngest, were both dead. Oh, little Kual. Salva closed his eyes for a few moments, trying to picture his brothers through a haze of time and grief. He learned more about his father's illness. Years of drinking contaminated water had left Maween Dut's entire digestive system riddled with guinea worms. Sick and weak, he had walked almost 300 miles to come to this clinic and was barely alive by the time he finally arrived. Salva and his father had several days together, but all too soon it was time for Salva to return to America. His father would be leaving the clinic shortly as well. The surgery that he had undergone had been successful, and he would soon be strong enough to make the long walk home. I will come to the village, Salva promised, as soon as it is safe. We will be there waiting for you, his father promised in turn. Salva pressed his face tightly to his father's as they hugged goodbye, their tears flowing and blending together. On the plane back to the United States, Salva replayed in his mind every moment of his visit with his father. He felt again the coolness on his brow when his father had sprinkled the water blessing on him. And an idea had come to him, an idea of what he might be able to do to help the people of Sudan. Could he do it? It would take so much work. Perhaps it would be too difficult. But how would he know unless he tried? Back in Rochester, Salva began working on his idea. There were, it seemed, a million problems to be solved. He needed a lot of help. Chris and Louise gave him many suggestions. Scott, a friend of theirs, was an expert in setting up projects like the one Salva had in mind. He and Salva worked together for hours and days, which grew into weeks and months. Along the way, Salva met other people who wanted to help. He was grateful to all of them. But even with their help, it was much more work than he'd imagined. Salva had to raise money for the project, and there was only one way to do this. He would have to talk to people and ask them to give money. The first time Salva spoke in front of an audience was in a school's cafeteria. About 100 people had come to hear him. There was a microphone at the front of the room. Salva's knees were shaking as he walked to the mic. He knew that his English was still not very good. What if he made mistakes in pronunciation? What if the audience couldn't understand him? But he had to do it, and if he didn't talk about the project, no one would learn about it. No one would donate money, and he would never be able to make it work. Salva spoke into the Salva spoke into the microphone. Hello, he said. And at that moment, something went wrong with the sound system. The speakers behind him let out a dreadful screech, and Salva jumped and almost dropped the mic. His hands trembling, he looked out at the audience. People were smiling or chuckling. A few of the children were holding their ears. They all looked very friendly, and seeing the children made him remember. It was not the first time he had spoken in front of a large group of people. Years ago, when he was leading those boys on their walk from the Ethiopian refugee camp to the one in Kenya, he had called a meeting every morning and every evening. The boys would line up facing him, and he would talk to them about their plans. All those eyes looking at him, but every face interested in what he had to say. It was the same here. The audience had come to the school cafeteria because they wanted to hear him. Thinking of that made him feel a little bit better as he spoke into the mic again. Hello, he repeated, and this time only his own voice came from the speakers. He smiled in relief and went on. I'm here to talk to you about a project for southern Sudan. A year passed, then 2, and then 3. Salva spoke to hundreds of people in churches, at civic governments, in schools. Would he ever be able to turn his idea into a reality? Whenever he found himself losing hope, Salva would take a deep breath and think of his uncle's words. A step at a time. One problem at a time. Just figure out this one problem. Day by day, solving one problem at a time, Salva moved toward his goal. Okay, we're going to stop there and we'll finish the rest of it next week.